He comes from the Rosh Yeshiva of Volozhin. Reb Chaim Brisker was the Rosh Yeshiva of Volozhin. So you have to realize that it didn't just start there. It affects right now today. And this model of leadership is a very interesting one. Now, I'm not saying for a minute, don't get me wrong, I don't believe that every single person should be doing this. The Vilna Gaon can do it because he was the Vilna Gaon. The Chazon Ish was the Chazon Ish. But for exceptional people, the cream of the crop, they should certainly be given this opportunity because they become a model and a role that can carry many, many generations of commitment to Torah and Mitzvah. People that he used to consult and strengthen the Gaon late in life was the Maggid of Vilna. Now, in those days, today we have inspirational speakers. In those days, they also had inspirational speakers. They were called Maggidim. You had the Dubna Maggid, the Maggid of Vilna. Every town had a Maggid. A Maggid was an inspirational speaker. Who gave those, everyone needs, this is a very important thing in life. Everyone needs input. Everyone needs strength. Everyone needs rejuvenation. Even the greatest teacher needs to learn. A greatest teacher needs to get his source of something from someone else. Otherwise, you get depleted. You have to have someone feeding you. Who was feeding these people? Was the Gaon of Vilna. The Gaon of Vilna strengthened them and gave them strength to carry on and doing what they were doing. Now, Aroche, he helped Rabbi Yonasan Abishitz and many other leaders of his time. I just wrote this because there was an interesting dispute between Rabbi Yonatan Abishitz. Now, you have to remember there was in Europe there was a whole incident that affected European Jewry with a false messiah by the name of Shabtai Tzvi. And there was a huge backlash after that. A huge backlash. Shabtai Tzvi basically, he acted as if he was Messiah. In the end he converted to Islam. A whole geschäft. It left the Jewish people, these kind of things leave the Jewish people in tatters. It left the Jewish people in a very low space. And there was a big backlash at that point. And you have to understand all Jewish history in this context. There was a big backlash against the study of Kabbalah, of mysticism. Because they felt that this is what it's going to lead to. People are becoming involved in too much in mysticism, and it's leading to this kind of false hope, or whatever it is. And there was a big backlash. So there was a great genius by the name of Rabbi Yonasan Abishitz. Rabbi Yonasan Abishitz, there was another great rabbi by the name of Rabbi Yaakov Ender. Rabbi Yonasan Abishitz used to do certain things with certain amulets. Now, you know what an amulet is, like a parchment or something that you write something on, you carry it, and it could have certain Kabbalistic powers, whatever it may be. And Rabbi Yaakov Emden put Rabbi Yonasan Abishitz, who was a great genius, in Chayrim. He said, don't keep away from him. And this dispute went through European Jewry. And Rabbi Yonasan Abishitz wrote to the Gaon of Vilna when he was still in his 30s, and he writes to him, I know you recognize to be the greatest man. Here are my amulets. Check out the writing and see if it's true what I'm saying. And he wrote back, he said, it's true. He said, who am I to say? But he said, it's what you're writing is valid and true and whatever. And there were many that tried to put an end to this dispute and this, that, and the other. So this was one of the disputes that were going on. So the point that I wanted to make here is that he had influence through his greatness because he reached these exceptional levels. Now there's another influence that he had which is quite interesting. First of all, he attempted to settle in Eretz Yisrael but returned, saying that heaven did not permit him to make the journey. No one really knows what it means. But he tried to go to Israel. He tried to make a pilgrimage, as many did. Remember we spoke about when Rabbi Nachman made a pilgrimage. Many made a pilgrimage there. Many, the Ramban went to settle in Eretz Yisrael. So he also wanted to. This is very interesting. These great sages, they all have a strong desire to be in Eretz Yisrael, to live in Eretz. He tried to go, but he didn't make it, and he returned. However, a whole group of his students, the Talmidei HaGra, settled between 1808 and 1810, and they settled in Yerushalayim. And I think that some of those people, the descendants of those people, exist today. They were called the Adat HaPrushim. The Prushim means the ones that separate. And they went to live in Yerushalayim at that time. Simultaneously, many Hasidim went to live in Tveria and Sfat and places like that during the same time period, around, in fact, a little bit before that. Okay. Now, so he did, one of the influences, by the way, was also to influence Yerushalayim and its culture, which did influence it, and still continues to influence it up until this very day. Now, what were his works? So his works are very interesting because one of the things about his works is that in general he wrote very brief comments. Now, I want to tell you something. I used to learn. I had a chavruta with now the chief rabbi of South Africa, Rabbi Warren Goldstein. You might have heard of him. I learned with him for many years. We used to learn together. We used to learn the code of Jewish law. And what we used to do is very often, especially on difficult sections, we used to look at these little notes of the Gaon of Vilna. And sometimes he would take us to a place, it would take us hours to understand the connection between the place he took us to and the halakha in question. When we got it, we were on cloud nine. Sometimes he put together the halakha so brilliantly in two sources, two words. It's mind-boggling, and he has notes on the entire code of Jewish law. Just that in and of itself would take most people 20 generations to figure out that stuff. And students said that if you had 1,000 years, you couldn't write down a quarter of his wisdom. He has commentaries and notes on parts of Tanakh and commentaries on the Talmud, commentaries. He wrote on certain Kabbalistic texts. There's a part of the Zohar called Sifra Tzniuta, the book of the hidden book, and he wrote on that, Sifra Tzniuta, and on Zohar and on everything. He wrote a commentary on the Mishnah, and he wrote also books on geometry and mathematics, and I'm going to come to that in a moment. Now that doesn't seem to fit in, right? He wrote on all these Kabbalistic works, and then he wrote a book on geometry and mathematics. Well, actually, it does fit in, because the Vilna Gaon was an expert in secular sciences. Now, the Vilna Gaon, and it's reported to have said, it's more than reported, someone who spoke to the Gaon about this recorded it, that the Gaon said that if one is lacking an aspect of secular wisdom, then one lacks 100-fold of Torah wisdom. He says if you're lacking an aspect of secular wisdom, whatever that aspect is, your Torah will be affected 100 times from that lack. Because he understood as follows: the Torah is the blueprint and wisdom of the entire world and the entire creation. It can't be that something in science could not contradict the Torah. It has to be complementary to that is in the Holy Torah, the wisdom of Hashem. Now, very interesting, and I want to bring you to this point because it's just a very interesting point. And the Vilna Gaon was not scared to say his opinion. Not only that, they say the Vilna Gaon was so ahead of his generation, he would argue even on much earlier generations, which was not common at all at the time. For an 18th century scholar to argue in Maimonides, to argue in these people, was not so common.